listening to CMDA Matters, the weekly podcast of Christian Medical and Dental Associations. Here's your host, Dr. Mike Chubb.
Welcome, friends, to CMDA Matters, where we explore the issues that matter most to Christian healthcare professionals. So whether you're in healthcare, married or otherwise related to a healthcare professional, or you're just simply interested in how God is working through Christ followers in patient care and beyond, we're so glad you're here. Before I dive in, I want to remind you of something very exciting. Starting August 1st, this podcast will have a new name. We're going to be calling it Faith in Healthcare, the CMDA Matters podcast. It's more than just a name change, actually. It's a reflection of who we are and where we're headed. We will still bring you the same inspiring stories, the bold voices, and the meaningful conversations with Christian healthcare professionals from across the country. But as our audience grows, this new name captures the heart of what this program is all about, the intersection of faith and healthcare. And what happens when your faith shows up where it matters most, in the clinic or in the classroom, the operating room, and beyond. Our prayer at CMDA is that this shift helps us reach even more listeners in the broader healthcare community, to share more hope and boldly live out the mission of Jesus Christ. And that through it, many new Christian healthcare professionals will find a home within the CMDA family. Because this is the community we are building together with God's help, it matters. And we are truly stronger together, friends. Well, today's episode features Mr. Ryan Bomberger's lively plenary address from our 2025 National Convention in St. Louis. Messages like these don't just challenge your thinking. They reignite your purpose and equip you to live it out with courage and conviction. Ryan is an Emmy award-winning creative, a passionate speaker, and the co-founder of the Radiance Foundation, a life-affirming organization rooted in the belief that every human life has purpose. From the foster care system to the national stage, Ryan's own story is one of courage, adoption, identity, and an unshakable faith. In this moving and often humorous message, Ryan invites us to be spokes in the wheel. That was our theme for the convention. Ordinary people used by God to bring about extraordinary impact. You're going to hear his testimony, his heart for adoption, his biblical convictions regarding abortion and gender ideology, and stories of men and women who are boldly standing for life, truth, and freedom, even when it costs them everything. So let's listen in.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and I love the fact that there are organizations like CMDA. The world needs medical professionals with competence, compassion, and most importantly, Jesus Christ, who is our moral compass. Amen? Amen. As mentioned, my name is Ryan Bomberger. I am the Chief Creative Officer, or you can call me the Chief Creative Agitator of the Radiance Foundation. I love to agitate for a good reason. I got a lot of practice as one of 13 kids. You know, sometimes you have that child who needs all the attention. That was probably me. Anyway, I love the work that God has called my wife and I to do, so whether it's Capitol Hill briefings, whether it's pregnancy center galas, conferences, churches, schools, whatever, we love fusing our faith with factivism to bring context and clarity to today's culture-shaping issues. I know that somebody out there is wondering, wait, what is factivism? I'm glad you asked. See, activism is emotion-based. Factivism is evidence-based. And so in our society that always loves to upgrade this and that, just consider factivism an upgrade of activism. You know, I am a factivist who is passionate about speaking the truth in love with a dash of sarcasm here and there. But I'll tell you, a few years ago, this factivist was invited to speak at Harvard. It was actually the new Harvard Students for Life, and I was invited also by the Black Law Students Association to informally debate Professor Diane Rosenfeld about abortion in Black communities. You can see the flyer here. She nearly backed out the night before because she was so angry that we dared to suggest, or at least state, that abortion causes deaths. So she wasn't going to show up. She did end up showing up 30 minutes late to the debate, but it was crazy because weeks prior, a Boston College professor also backed out. I guess they heard that the Factivist was in town and they were scared. I don't know. But here's the deal. I felt inadequate. Anybody here feel inadequate for a particular circumstance and situation? I felt inadequate. And we know that Satan loves to discourage us. Like screw tape letters, he loves to whisper that lie into our ears, raising doubt about what God has already confirmed. And so here I am, I'm getting ready the morning of, and I don't normally get nervous at all before I speak. And so I just kept this overwhelming feeling inside of me. I'm like, what is this? What is it? It was anxiety. And I kept thinking, I'm not worthy. I just kept thinking of, Dana Carvey and Mike Myers, like, I'm not worthy. That's what I kept feeling like. It's an Ivy League school. I didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. I'm not worthy. So I'm getting a shower, and all I could think of is, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be the one to speak at Harvard? What do I have to offer? That's what I thought. And so I'm getting showered, and then all of a sudden, I look up at the stinking shower head. And now, I had to make sure when I looked at the picture, I'm like, I took the picture after the shower. Yes, I took the picture after the shower, so there's no reflection. I just said that would be strange. But this is the speaker. This is the shower head. It was like God was speaking to me. Speak, man! Just speak! Sometimes the things come out as subtly, and other times, not so much. It was from that moment on that I knew. I still thought, I'm going to go to this event, and this is Harvard. They're going to ask me, these deep, detailed questions, philosophical questions, complete with citations. That was kind of what I was expecting. Not at all what I got. That was what I was expecting. In fact, so when I go to speak at Harvard, and I just realized actually recently, apparently it was actually standing room only. There were so many people standing around the whole auditorium. It was great. It was the first event for Harvard Students for Life. But can you see almost like 2/3 away over to the right, there's someone whose back is to me? I guess that was her form of protest to me. But that was mild compared to what I experienced. I never thought in my life that I would get the kind of reception that I did. I will say I've spoken at probably 100 colleges. I have experienced all kinds of things. I've been smoke bombed out of a college, out of the building that was at UT Austin. Thank you for keeping it weird, Austin. And I have been protested at University of Louisville, but I never experienced the kind of insanity here. The students all had mics at their desks, these semicircle sort of desks, and they all had a mic in front of them. So whenever they wanted to talk or tell me something about my mom I never knew, they would just say things. And that was the whole experience. The Q&A session was raucous, it was hostile, but truth, even when spoken in love, is hated. And this is when I realized, wow, hell really breaks loose when we speak the truth. But also, there's breakthrough when you speak that truth. And so we love doing this. If you go to radiance.life, it's the easiest way to see a lot of the content. Some of the articles are great about us, some of them are not. George Soros's Media Matters obviously doesn't like me. The worst anti-abortion misinformers that you might never have heard of. I love the folks who are actually the ones peddling in lies on a daily basis are the ones who brand others as the misinformers. But that being said, I learned really quickly in our organization that my story of adoption and Bethany's story of resilience as a single mom weren't the cute stories that they were going to love. We learned really quickly how fake news can be and how hostile it can be. So we decided that we're going to persevere no matter how we were treated. You can see some of the presentations that we do here, and as mentioned earlier, these are some of the books, Pro-Life Kids, He is He, She is She, Not Equal. It's so crazy that, especially the two books in the middle, that's the controversial stuff? That stuff is controversial? Okay. So we love fusing faith and factivism. And being fearless is not something that we pride ourselves in. It's something that is given to us by God. He is the one who emboldens us to do everything that we do. And so I can't start this off about fearless faith and factivism without talking about two of the most important people next to my wife, my kiddos, in my life, my parents, Henry and Andrea Bomberger. They were parents of just 13 kids, just 13, and they definitely served as spokes. My parents chose to be, and not even really intentionally, they weren't activists or factivists. They weren't, warriors who were actually on a cause. They just knew that they were called to love. So through the loving act of adoption, they dared to challenge the status quo when it came to race and disability. In fact, eugenicist Henry Goddard, the famed psychologist who coined the term moron and also developed the IQ test. Anybody remember having their IQ tested in here? Was it a good day? He's like, yeah, I aced it. Well, they're not really that accurate anyway, but just joking. But I'm sure you did an amazing job. But Henry Goddard was a eugenicist who had a really broken worldview about humanity. In fact, he saw the adoption of what he called feeble-minded children. Feeble-minded children apparently were children born to women who weren't married, because those women obviously were feeble-minded, which reminds me, when I think of feeble-minded people, does Congress come to anybody's mind? Just saying. Anyway, there's some great congressmen and congresswomen. But he thought that adoption was actually a crime against the family, because those feeble-minded children, I guess me, end up reproducing later on in life, and all they do is create more defectives. So this was the eugenic mindset. My parents obviously didn't agree with that whatsoever. My parents loved all of us. They weren't worried about heredity, but they operated out of humanity. People will literally say things like, why would you do this to your family? Why would you bring a physically disabled child into your home? You're going to reduce the quality of life of your family. Or, why would you bring somebody of a different color? What is the community going to think? When people say that, like, stop projecting. What do you actually think? Because you somehow think that someone needs to be the same color to love somebody else. So here is the Bomberger family. These are all of us. And you can see it's like the evolution of the Bombergers. And it starts off with the five, my three older siblings, who I love to call the homemade ones, because I haven't come up with a label that's any better, so that's who they are. And the heart for adoption actually began way before. When my mom was 5, she was placed in a children's home because her parents were separating. She had a father who was a heavy drinker, and he was emotionally and psychologically abusive to her mom. But that's where that heart began. And she met the most amazing man that I've ever known, my dad, Henry Bomberger, and they ended up adopting me. I was the first one adopted. And obviously it went well, because every year, new flavor added to the family. And you can see in this last picture, this is actually all 13 Bomberger kids and our parents, and we don't look alike. We're a mixture of all kinds of things. Not just a mixture for skin color, but a mixture in backgrounds, a mixture in experiences. Some of my siblings came from some really horrific backgrounds. We're white, we're black, we're white and black, Native American, Vietnamese. I'm a mixture. In fact, recently I did that whole, I shouldn't have done it, because the company went bankrupt. I don't know what they're gonna do with my DNA, but I did find out that I'm a mixture literally of everything. White and black, I'm Ukrainian. I started flying the Ukrainian flag recently, I'm just joking. Nigerian, I did get to go to Nigeria years ago, that was awesome. But I'm a British, German, Irish, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Greek, Italian, Ghanaian, Sierra Leonean. I'm a mixture of so many things. I'm even part Asian, and I am more Native American than Elizabeth Warren. Just saying, what? So, I'm just saying. I've not used that. I've not actually used any of that to advance my life. But anyway, this is our family. My parents would never have said, oh yeah, we are being spokes, but in their quiet yet profoundly loud way, they were spokes in the wheels of injustice. And I love them for it. My mom, the reason why I write the way I write, the reason why I love the power of words, my dad, just amazing parents who love Jesus. This is one of the only photos I have of my dad holding me when I was a child. Boy, I was a handful. Thank you, Dad, for surviving and being patient. But he's the reason why I love being a husband, why I love being a dad. And I lost him tragically during the height of COVID. Many of you may have lost a friend, a loved one. Really not my favorite time in life ever. But I lost him during the height of COVID. He died, actually, he passed away on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. The most pro-life man that I've ever known died on the day that the pro-abortion left celebrates fatherlessness, because that's really what a lot of this is about. But his faith and love redeemed that day for me. In fact, our new children's book, He Is He, the illustrator, I'm one of the authors. The illustrator, Ed Kaler, actually lives in this area. He's from the St. Louis area. He's amazing, and he just really captured that image and many other these great images. I feel like he did such a great job. But my parents were spokes, and it wasn't like they wanted any kind of acknowledgement. They just knew that they were doing what God called them to do. And so I want to show you what being spokes in the wheels of injustice actually can look like. So this is my whole family. All the Bombergers, all my brothers, my sisters, my spouse, their spouses. Well, that sounded weird. My spouses have one spouse. Her name is Bethany. I love her like crazy. But my sibling spouses and their children, and there's one extended family member in the middle, a grandma. I was talking to some people earlier this evening. My grandma is turning 101 in a few days. But she's the only one in the middle of the picture. But this is what it looks like when we choose to be spokes in the wheels of injustice. So these are all the Bombergers as of 9 years ago. And so since then there have been 24 more lives added to this picture, if you would. New marriages, births, and adoptions. I have nieces and nephews who are now adoptive parents. But it's amazing the legacy that can be carried on. And this picture is possible, of course, because of courageous birth moms. This picture is filled with those who were adopted out of the foster care system. I was adopted out of the foster care system. And we often hear people say things like, well, no child should ever go into that system. Ideally, of course not. But sometimes children need to be rescued from the situation that they're in. In fact, I love the fact that my parents poured their lives into all of us, changed the trajectory of our lives, so that they could make trauma a reference point, not a resting place. And so for the people who say a child shouldn't go through foster care, that they're better off dead, nobody is better off dead. We are all better off loved. Amen? And so in my situation, people often ask me, well, have you met your birth mom? I have not. I searched for her years and years ago and never had a response to that search. And so I figured as a creative, how do I thank my birth mom? What do I say to her? So I created this video. I wrote these lyrics, sang these lyrics, and I thought, if I never meet her face to face, that maybe some way, somehow, she will see this and understand how grateful her birth son is, not only to be given of life, but to be given the incredible gift of adoption. These are all the things I've been able to become in my life by the grace of God and because of a singular decision. You know, I think about my life, and I had to sum up some of the major challenges in my life. Abortion could have killed me, but God. Severe depression in my late 20s, early 30s could have killed me, but God. Bilateral blood clots in my lungs during COVID, 8 days hospitalized, could have killed me, but God. And last year, cancer tried to kill me, but God. I am in remission, so I thank God for that. I know I'm here for a reason. I once spoke at a rally on the steps of the Capitol in Alabama, in Montgomery. Days prior, an Alabama lawmaker called people like me the residue of the rapist. I'm not the residue of the rapist. I'm the resilience of my birth mom. I'm so grateful. My whole life I prayed that my birth mom got the wholeness and the healing that she needed. I'm the loved son of Henry and Andrea Bomberger, and most importantly, I'm a child of God, regardless of how I came to be. And who knew that my favorite childhood hero, Frederick Douglass, shared a little bit of my same story. He was also conceived in rape. Can you imagine American history without Frederick Douglass? He was meant to be, and he was meant to be that voice that broke through centuries of deception and lies about who we are and the inherent God-given worth that we all possess. And he refused to allow the wheels of injustice, of slavery's injustice, to crush more vulnerable human lives, and didn't allow anyone to silence him. In fact, mainstream media at the time, it's funny how, history just repeats itself over and over again. Mainstream media was fake news back then, and it still is today. So what did he do? Did he give up, throw his hands up and say, I can't do anything about it? No, he started his own newspaper called the North Star in Rochester, New York. And what I love is the slogan, aside from all the amazing articles and his incredible eloquence, the slogan of that periodical says this, and I'm not sure if you can read it from the screen, but it says this: right is of no sex, truth is of no color, God is the Father of us all, and we are all brethren. So never let anyone gender or color shame you into silence. Amen? Amen. So here we have, there are many quotes I could use from Frederick Douglass. Literally, there are thousands of quotes I could use from him. I love this quote. Simple, to the point, and so relevant to today. Free speech is the dread of tyrants. It was free speech that allowed for emancipation. Without being able to talk about the evils of slavery, how do you then rise above slavery? Speaking of, another spoke in the wheel. What does a white woman know about slavery? What does she have to offer? We live in this day and age where you have to be the right color, right, to say certain things. And people often say to me, well, wow, I couldn't say what you just said. Why not? Is it the truth? Then speak it. And thank goodness for Harriet Beecher Stowe, who spoke the truth, who wrote the truth. She wrote a book that you might have heard of, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it was the first book ever to sell 1 million copies. Actually was vying with sales of the Bible one particular year. It had a profound impact. See, this is what faith and factivism looked like. It changed a nation. I think about the threats that we've received at the Radiance Foundation. And we've received a lot of threats. I'm talking like death threats and craziness because of what we do. But this is nothing new. Harriet Beecher Stowe received death threats. In fact, she received all kinds of death threats, and she received in the mail a severed ear from a slave. We have not received an ear or any other body part. Thank you. Thank the Lord for that. But this is a woman who wasn't going to be stopped. This is someone who saw slavery and Christianity as completely incompatible. And she was the unexpected spoke in the wheel, and we still feel those reverberations. It's amazing what happens when someone simply just chooses to be used by God. Dr. Mildred Jefferson, how many have ever heard of Dr. Mildred Jefferson? And for those of you who haven't, well, let me introduce you to her. She said this, among many other things. Quote, I would guess that the abortionists have done more to get rid of generations and cripple others than all the years of slavery and lynchings. End quote. This was her quote in 1978 to Ebony magazine, and it was about her assessment that she considered abortion to be genocide in the black community. So even back then, she could point that out. In fact, she said there are now more abortions than live births in DC, and the same is true for New York City. Well, today in New York City, in Manhattan, where Planned Parenthood is headquartered, more black babies are aborted than born alive. It's still happening. In fact, in Manhattan, for every 1,000 born alive, 1,428 are aborted. The only demographic that has this kind of statistic, this upside down statistic. And in New York City as a whole, for every 1,000 born alive, 1,012 are aborted. Dr. Jefferson was a fighter for all of the unborn. Her eloquence was arguably, or I would say probably inarguably, unmatched in her time. She passed away in October 2010, but not before she blazed trails. Maybe some of you were able to hear her speak live, but she refused to be silent. She chose to be a spoke, saying, quote, "I am not willing to stand aside and allow the concept of expendable human lives to turn this great land of ours into just another exclusive reservation where only the perfect, the privileged, and the planned have the right to live." Let me just play you a little clip about Dr. Mildred Jefferson.
It is unconscionably unfair that the victim selected on which to test the social remedy of expendable lives is the most defenseless member of the human family, the unborn child who cannot escape, cannot riot in the streets, and cannot vote. As a woman, I am ashamed that the voices raised loudest in this demand to destroy the unborn children are those of other women.
All the reverberations. Yeah, Dr. Mildred Jefferson should be in every textbook in public school, private school. You might recognize, do you recognize the fellow on the right? Anybody know who that is? Who? Ronald Reagan. Many of you might not know that when he was governor of California, he signed the Therapeutic Abortion Act in 1967, which allowed abortion in cases of like rape and incest and the life of the mother, which wasn't really defined, which then ballooned into 200,000 abortions a year. And now California doesn't even keep track accurately of its abortions, but it's well over 130,000. But his heart and his mind were changed. She is credited with changing Ronald Reagan's mind on the issue of abortion. Another spoke in the wheel, someone I've become friends with over the years, Jack Phillips. You may have heard of Jack Phillips, Masterpiece Cake Shop. Who knew that there would be a war over cake? But this man, honestly, one of the gentlest men I've ever met. He loves the Lord. His family loves the Lord. The attacks that they've had to endure years and years in court. Even though they serve everyone, he doesn't serve every event. He doesn't create every message. I mean, he doesn't, in fact, he wouldn't create Halloween cakes. He doesn't create cakes for divorce. There's certain things he just doesn't create. And so, of course, a same-sex couple came to him and they wanted him to create a cake for their wedding. And he said, look, you can have anything in the store, but I won't create something specifically for your wedding. I can't do that. And was taken to court. And it's unbelievable the things that people like Jack Phillips have to go through. And as a creative, I'm trying to imagine someone forcing me. In fact, I was asked by the Atlanta Museum of Human Rights. They wanted me to create some promo videos for the exhibits. And of course, some of the exhibits contain some LGBTQ content. And I said, well, I don't actually agree with that. I can't do that. I can't imagine being forced to create the video content anyway. And that's what he has to face. That's what many other designers, web designers, and artists had to face. In fact, ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, can we just give a hand clap for them? Because they have done an amazing job. But they defended him, and this is actually one of the videos that we created to defend Jack. In fact, I remember speaking at the Supreme Court rally, we had this whole slogan and all these these pieces of these placards saying, "We got your back, Jack." But it was an awesome thing to be able to stand in solidarity with Jack Phillips.
This is not just cake. Cake art is a form of creative expression, just like painting, writing, photography, floral design, singing, or speaking. And they're all protected by the First Amendment. No government, no judge, no city council, no one should be able to dictate which events require your unique artistic expression. Free speech should be a piece of cake. Learn more at justiceforjack.org.
And what's crazy is he just recently went through his third time going through court because he wouldn't make a transgender cake, transgender in quotes, but it's really amazing the people who will stand up. They're the unexpected warriors. They didn't ask for this, but it's amazing what happens when you choose to obey God. And this was the moment at the Supreme Court after they came out, the Supreme Court, and you just never know. You never know when Satan is going to attack you and going to test you. What will your response be? I think of a good friend of mine. I've become friends with him. His name is Tanner Cross, who was a teacher in LCPS, Loudoun County Public Schools. You've probably heard of Loudoun County, Virginia. Yes, school board's gone wild. That's where I live. And Tanner was one of 3 teachers out of thousands and thousands of teachers who actually stood against a radical gender policy that required teachers to call girls boys and boys girls. And so this husband and educator loved his students too much, loved his God too much to actually not be a spoke in the wheel. So this is just a snippet of him speaking at that school board meeting.
I love all of my students, but I will never lie to them regardless of the consequences. I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa, because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
Amen to that. The next day he was suspended from his job for articulating that. I guess free speech does not apply to teachers. And it took years to have certain things resolved, but thankfully the state court reinstated his job, the Supreme Court agreed with that. And I just want to play you a little clip, because had he not chosen to be bold and courageous and speak at that event, I never would have heard of him. And it was at the time that we had just launched our Henry and Andrea Bomberger Adopted and Loved Fund, which was named after my late father and my mom, who's still alive and still kicking and still unleashing purpose. And so we were looking for our first recipients. And I went on Facebook to kind of look him up, and I found his wife's Facebook page, and it was public, and so I started reading their tragic story of not being able to conceive a child, 10 years in marriage, and reading about how much they love the Lord, and I thought, these would be awesome first-time recipients of this award. I'm just going to play you a short snippet of this with Angela and Tanner.
He said, I heard your story and I want to help. The Henry and Andrea Bomberger Adopted and Loved Fund is a fund for Christian families to help them through the trials of adoption. It was put in place by Ryan and his beautiful wife, Bethany Bomberger, at the Radiance Foundation. 10 years of prayer for a child. And we've tried everything and never thought that we could afford it.
We just feel so blessed by the Adopted and Love Fund that was just able to allow Angela and I to have our miracle.
Just a moment of doubt could have kept him from walking up to that mic that night. Never would have heard of him. That little boy is turning 2 years old in a few days. He is the cutest little thing, little Josiah. Oh my goodness. So these people, my wife and I, Ryan and Bethany Bomberger, parents, factivists, authors, and spokes, and we love doing what we do. In fact, I mentioned this whole lawsuit with the NAACP, which was shocking to me. It was the most surreal experience of my life to get a cease and desist letter from an organization that I grew up revering, an organization I've read many, many, many things about, and that I respected deeply, telling me that I can't parody their name because I wrote an article, being the factivist that I am, wrote an article and I called them the National Association for the Abortion of Colored People. So they didn't like it for some reason. So they sued me, they sued the Radiance Foundation. In fact, this picture is, you can't tell in the background, but this is my wife Bethany and I outside of the courthouse in Norfolk. And it was a 2-year crazy battle. The federal judge in Norfolk ruled against us and ruled that we are never allowed to parody the NAACP's name. And I was saying earlier today in the session today, the judge was a lifetime member of the NAACP. His sister was a former, sister-in-law was a former president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He didn't have to recuse himself. But part of what we were being sued for was trademark infringement, dilution, and confusion. We were confusing the public about what NAACP stood for. So I'm sitting in the witness box, or whatever you call that, the witness stand, and he kept calling them the NCAA. The entire time, throughout the trial, I was like, you need to sue him. It was crazy, but I will say, again, Alliance Defending Freedom, I'm not trying to do an unpaid commercial for them, but they're awesome because they defended us, and we won. So thank you, Alliance Defending Freedom. We won on appeal. We could have lost the Radiance Foundation. We could have lost everything, but we didn't. And we knew that God called us to do what we were doing. Even if we would be hated, even if we would receive the death threats that we did, we would keep on moving on. In fact, the Radiance Foundation, the name itself comes from my wife's resilience, comes from God orchestrating things that in the natural don't even make sense. See, my wife was a teacher in inner city Philly, her last 3 years of teaching in public school. Walked away from a toxic relationship because she had walked away from God and had become numb to all the things of God. Walks away from this toxic relationship only to find out that she's pregnant and felt so much shame. And she remembers coming home from the appointment, the ultrasound appointment, and she, the ultrasound where she sees the baby's heartbeat look like a little blinking piece of rice, and she describes it this way, that it was God wrapping her heart around her baby's heart and his heart around theirs. And so when she went home that night and looked in her journal, the verses Psalm 34, 4, and 5 were in the margin. And those verses say this: I sought the Lord and he relieved me of all my fears, that those who look to him are radiant. They are never covered with shame. And so when I think of being a spoke in the wheel of injustice, I think of my wife, who could have chosen the easy way out. She never considered abortion, but the pressure on her to abort was crazy. In fact, some of her teachers said that, just abort it. We'll help pay for it. The biological father, especially once he found out the baby was a girl, wanted nothing to do with that baby. But this is not only the story of my wife's resilience, it's the story of the Radiance Foundation. It's the story of our family and why God chose to bring Bethany and I together so that we could train up more spokes. My family, my youngest son, Justice, my youngest daughter, Aaliyah, my oldest daughter, Ray, Radiance, and my oldest son, Makai. And I want to say this, 1 Corinthians 16, 13 through 14, I hope my children embrace this as their life verse. Be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, and then that last part, which is not so easy, and do everything with love. So be a spoke in the wheel that makes life flourish, that sets people free, and that points people to the forever hope for all of humanity, Jesus Christ. Thank you, guys. God bless.
Well, Ryan Bomberger's message reminded me that courage doesn't require a huge platform. It just requires obedience. Whether you're in a hospital or a classroom, a clinic, you have the opportunity to be someone who stands firm, who speaks truth in love, as you heard from 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 14, and one who helps others find the hope of Christ. Friends, if this episode encouraged you, please share it with a friend of yours or a student or a colleague. You can also follow the podcast on your favorite platform and on social media so that you never miss an episode. If you'd like to learn more about CMDA's mission and how we are equipping healthcare professionals for such a time as this, just visit cmda.org, our main webpage. I'd like to take a moment to personally invite our women listeners in medicine or dentistry to a very special event coming up this September, and that is the Women Physicians and Dentists in Christ Commission. They will be holding their annual conference September 4th through the 7th in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the beautiful Hotel Albuquerque, right in the heart of Old Town and the rising Sawmill District. Registration is now open, and this conference, it promises to be worth your time. Alongside our very special guest, Helen Smallbone, who is the mother of the artist known as For King and Country. You'll also hear from me, Dr. Mike Chupp, as I deliver a plenary message on the theme, God Makes a Way, from Isaiah 43:19. This is one of the very best ways to experience the belonging and the support and the equipping that is at the very heart of WPDC ministry. Of course, CME is available, and I invite you to explore all of the conference details, as well as to register even today by going to wpdc.cmda.org. Well, our final plenary address that we're featuring here in July from the 2025 National Convention comes from Dr. John Wyatt. He's Professor Emeritus of Neonatal Pediatrics and Ethics at the University College of London. He's a longtime neonatologist, and he's a leading voice on the ethical and spiritual implications of emerging technologies and artificial intelligence. As president of the United Kingdom Christian Medical Fellowship and a frequent speaker at Christian conferences all around the world, Dr. Wyatt brings both deep expertise and insight. In his powerful message, he explores the promise as well as the peril of AI in healthcare. And why, friends, now more than ever, we must defend the sacredness of human connection and the image of God in every patient. So you don't want to miss it. Thanks for listening to Faith in Healthcare, the CMDA Matters podcast, where our mission remains the same, bringing the hope and healing of Christ to the world through committed Christ followers in healthcare. That's what matters to CMDA and Faith in Healthcare, the CMDA Matters podcast. May you recognize this week that the Lord is with you and that He is for you, friends, to do His good work. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time, Lord willing, on Faith in Healthcare.
Thanks for listening to CMDA Matters. If you would like to suggest a future guest or share a comment with us, please email cmdamatters@cmda.org. And if you like the podcast, be sure to give us a 5-star rating and share it on your favorite social media platform. This podcast has been a production of Christian Medical and Dental Associations. The opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are not necessarily endorsed by Christian Medical and Dental Associations. CMDA is a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse political parties or candidates for public office. The views expressed on this podcast reflect judgments regarding principles and values held by CMDA and its members, and are not intended to imply endorsement of any political party or candidate.